Hello, this is Jerome and welcome to the vlog. This is the channel where we talk about pop culture, basketball, and sneakers. And for today's episode, these are the 6 things that I took away from the Last Dance documentary. Let's go! So if you haven't watched The Last Dance, it's basically a documentary about the 1997 to 1998 Chicago Bulls, which was led by the greatest player of all time, Michael Jordan. It's still on Netflix and on ESPN, so if you want to watch it, feel free to do so. It's one of the greatest things I've seen so far in terms of sports. And it's also a very troubling time wherein we could use something like that. So here are my 6 biggest takeaways from the documentary. Of course, I am partially honoring the 6 championships, the 6 championship sign that Michael was doing by the end of the documentary, of course. So let's get right into it. So take number 1. So my first take is, after watching the documentary, after finishing episode 10, my initial thought was, they should have run it back. It's just that simple. Phil had the opportunity to go back. Reinsdorf offered him the opportunity to do so. Michael wanted to defend his title and eventually could have won his 7th. I read somewhere that Pippen would be open to the possibility of coming back if it was for the right price. So it's just a matter of ego really between Krause and Phil Jackson. And Dynasty shouldn't end that way. We see Bird's Celtics, we see Magic Johnson's Lakers, we see Isaiah Thomas and the Pistons, we see Shaq and Kobe's Lakers, or Kevin Durant and Stephen Curry's Warriors. They were all defeated. Eventually the tank ran out of gas, but it shouldn't have happened from the inside. So basically, that's really the first thing that stuck in my mind, is they should have run it back. They had the chance to win a 7th title. It doesn't matter if they do so or if they don't. What matters is they try to give it a chance, because they were still the defending champions, and Michael was still the greatest player by that time. He actually just won the MVP. So that's my first takeaway. And number 2, there's no I in team. That's basically a very cheesy line if you want to think about it. But the thing is, Michael infamously actually retorted to this line by saying, but there's an I in win. And then you see as the documentary progresses that he actually leaned onto the idea of having a team to win. You see that when he gave up his shots against the Lakers to give John Paxson the open shot. You could see that in the game 6 of the 97 finals, wherein he basically gave the last shot to Steve Kerr. So eventually, even the greatest basketball player of all time needs a team to win. And we see that in this documentary. We see the characters, the role players, the bench players fleshed out. We see where Kukoc came from. We see how Bill Cartwright got into the team. Horace Grant was their 3rd best player during the first three-peat. And really, we see these players as role players to Michael's success, but we see that they're much more when you actually look into the documentary. So with that, my 3rd take is actually context is everything in this documentary. I really love how they try to provide context for everything, for every shot, for every rivalry, for every beef. There was a context to it. They do a time jump to 1980 or to 1970s, and with this we are given a proper context about not just Michael, but we are given the proper context about these players and where they came from, and how they eventually got into the team, what fuels them. We got to see Dennis Rodman at his most human moments. We see where Pippen came from a family where there were two disabled people. We see the fire that was lit by Michael Jordan's father and his brother. So these things, these context is very important in terms of understanding who these players are and what makes them tick and what makes them go. So this is context is everything for this documentary. It was able to provide context at a very good level. So my fourth takeaway is Michael Jordan is actually human. Well, sometimes. We see Michael Jordan, the figure, the greatest basketball player of all time, the brand, the shoes, the amazing highlights, the amazing feats, the amazing accolades. But this is really one of those rare times when we see Michael Jordan, the human, where he came from, how he was raised, and how he built his competitive fire from his father to his brother to being cut out of the high school basketball team to making that shot in North Carolina, and then eventually when he got into the league where we see him struggle in his first few years. We see him have that competitive attitude at his first year. By game 3 he was already the best player on the team and everyone recognized that. By the second year where he was injured, he could have literally ended his career. There was a 10% chance that he could have ended his career, but still he decided to push through, and then we would have never seen that 49-point and 63-point outing against Boston if he did sit out in the 1986 season. So there are 3 specific instances wherein we actually felt him being human. First is of course when he talks about his father and how his father's death really affected him and prompted him to retire. So there we see Michael emotional. Number 2 is when he was talking about his teammates. There was this quote, I don't know from where episode, I don't know what episode exactly is it, but he was saying that if you didn't have as much will as I do or as I did, then we shouldn't be playing on the same team. And then he was on the verge of tears and he eventually asked for a break, which was very telling of how important winning was for him and maybe how the public's perception or how his teammates' perception is slightly affecting him, because in a way they may have never truly understand the competitive fire that Michael Jordan really was. And then the most human moment for Michael Jordan was when he won the 1996 NBA championship during Father's Day. Of course, his father was not there. And then we remember the image, of course, of him holding the trophy, hugging it on the floor while wearing Jordan 11s. But this may be the first time that we actually hear him crying. And that to me, and that to a lot of people, is a really, really stunning moment. And that is a really telling moment of how important that moment was to him. Because really, I think all he could ever think at that moment was, I won this for you, Dad. And really, I think a lot of us are really touched by that. We all saw the image, but not the audio. This is really Michael at his most human. So for my 5th take, you can't speak Michael Jordan without speaking Scottie Pippen. This has been quite a ride for Pippen. This documentary portrayed him in various ways, and I think the portrayal was actually just accurate, or was just justified. We saw him in his bad days. We saw him in his good days. We saw him quitting on the team during the 94 semifinals against the New York Knicks, and I'm not sure if that's really important in the process of storytelling in this Last Dance documentary, but of course it has to be included. Then we see him almost quitting on the team by the 98 season because he didn't get the contract that he wanted or that he felt he deserved, which was also a cause of his decisions. And I can't really blame him for making those decisions. He want to secure his family, he want to have financial security. But at the end of the day, all of Pippin's problems in the documentary were caused by him. But still, this documentary is really giving us the context that Michael would have not won 6 if not for Pippin, perhaps the greatest second option of all time. You see just how much they struggled in the 97 to 98 season without him, and Rodman and Jordan was barely holding it down. And then you saw him in the game 6, the pivotal game 6 against the Jazz. You saw his back hurt like hell, but still he was able to push through. He was willing to go through that much pain because his team needed him. By the end of the documentary, I could still say that Pippin was portrayed just fine. There were negatives, there were positives, but at the end of the day, you can't say Michael Jordan without saying Scottie Pippen. And for my last dance, or my last take, Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all time. And this is not new to everyone. But what really solidified the argument for him being the greatest of all time is his competitive fire. It's not really the wins, it's not really the accolades. Heck, there were no mentions of his numbers or of his accolades. How many All NBA teams did he win, or how many points did he score, or his efficiency from the field, or how he was effective on both sides of the floor. None of that really mattered. The argument for him, the narrative for him being the greatest of all time in this documentary is mainly about his competitive fire. That he would be willing to go through all lengths. He would try to win at any cost possible. And really, that's just the eye test. You don't really employ statistics or numbers, not even logic, I think. You just look at it and just feel it from your gut that, damn, I am watching the greatest basketball player of all time. And it doesn't matter if you're from that era, if you're born during this time of LeBron. It doesn't matter where you're from. The context that this documentary provides is that Jordan was something else, something greater than himself, and really it transpired to a lot of people. He let the game speak for himself. He didn't have to say words. He didn't have to be loud per se on social media. He let the game speak for himself. He let this competitive fire in this documentary speak for himself. And really, I think that's what separates him from the other greats. So those are my 6 takeaways from the Last Dance documentary. It's really sad not to be waiting for anything come Monday time, which is when we see this in the Philippines. I know other countries watch this during Sunday nights, but for us, it's really just sad to go through a Monday not waiting for anything. So if you still want a Last Dance, so if you still want content about the Last Dance, I have some other things in mind. I want to make a case for LeBron as the GOAT with the support of the Last Dance documentary. So basically, the idea is, what is the case for LeBron being the GOAT after the Last Dance documentary? I think that this is really something interesting, and I have a lot of arguments made up in my mind that I built after watching the documentary. So if you would like to see that, just comment it down below. And well, once again, thank you for watching and really just for sticking around. I'm really appreciative of you watching towards the end. So that's it for today's vlog. Finally, I got to talk about The Last Dance. It's been a week. It's been more than a week after the last episode, and I'm really happy to finally be able to share my thoughts on it. If you want other Last Dance related videos, just comment down below. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and see you all in the next one.